Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. This week at the virtual roundtable, we have Austin and Mary joining us, and we're talking about one that I think we were just talking about. We'll see how deep it goes. But this week, we're talking about a phrase or a saying that radically changed your life in one way or the other, positively or negatively, I guess. But how's everybody feeling about this topic this week? Everybody feels ready for it, ready to go?
Yeah. Well, what I just said is we only have to have one, because I have 5.
And Austin, you said you're learning new phrases that change your life constantly.
Dude, every day, man. Every day. if it radically changes my view in that moment, and then I may forget it. But the ones I didn't, I have prepared for today.
Okay. Well, I do, before we get into them, I want to talk about kind of like the purpose, the idea behind this. What do y'all hope that the listeners get out of these phrases and these ideas today?
Well, for me, they're mantras. They're something that help propel growth, action. I mean, as y'all know, I'm that person that I'm like, negative. I didn't do, the statements that are negative. I'm like, no, they're the ones that changed my life. For me, it's a mantra. It's something that you grab a hold of going, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to remember? What action can I take?
Yeah, I think similarly, I'm in the same vein there. For me, words are important. They constantly pondering different things and going through different avenues, arenas of life, whether that's seasonally with my kids or with my family or in work or in settings. And there have been these just constant phrases or words that stick with me. And I usually put them on my walls, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of that and understanding that. So whether you resonate with these words or not as a listener, I hope you do. But if you don't, that's okay. It's the principle of finding those things that inspire you, to Mary's point, to take action, that motivate you beyond in the day-to-day, to keep you consistent in life and really pushing forward and moving forward no matter what's going on around you. And I think that's the power of these quotes or phrases or things that if we can fix our eyes on it, we can move it, and if we draw attention to it. So.
Yeah. For me, I love this, and this has been on the board for a while. Since we started the podcast, it's been a topic on the board to go through. But I think throughout my leadership journey specifically, holding on to short phrases, I mean, like 5 to 10 words throughout a day, is a lot easier to remind myself of than thinking about these big concepts and like, I have to be the best leader I can be. Like how do you contextualize that? And for me, in different seasons of life, you hold on to different phrases that can get you through the day to day. And so I put this card on the board because I thought it'd be interesting as I've gone through books or other podcasts. You hear these phrases, things stick out to you, you hold on to them. So that's why I kind of want just a dedicated podcast of like, out of the three of us, what are those ones that we really stick on to? And we have this little catalog now for other people to hold on to. So, Mary, you got 5 of them. Start us off.
Well, the very first one that came to my mind was actually when I went through this entire transformation of leadership. And in 2003, I had gone through leadership training, was in a very huge transition in my life, and I was journaling, and I wrote down, what am I willing to do to get to where I want to go? And that became my mantra, to get up, to wake up, to do it, to do the hard stuff. And I would ask myself all the time, what am I willing to do to get to where I want to go? And it became everything that I did to get out of my comfort zone. Like if I was scared, it's like, okay, what am I willing to do? I'm not going to sit back and make excuses. If it's, there's another one, if it's up to me, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. But that really was everything. It launched me into action. It launched me into playing bigger. It launched me into taking risks and doing things I never, ever thought possible. It launched me into being here now because what was I willing to do to get to where I want to be?
Yeah. Is that one still with you? Still echoes in your head today?
It does. It's morphed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's morphed into the 1%. It's morphed into no excuses,
That's actually a really cool progression of that one from what am I willing to do to now, for all intent and purposes, you are where you were wanting to go then. So now it's how do I just continually get better that 1% every day?
Yeah. It's really weird because I remember the first time I wrote that down, and I was on my bed with this journal, and I didn't have it. It was a huge book. I got it at an art and craft store. It was like a 8.5 by 11, just this huge thick notebook that was just blank pieces of paper.
Yeah.
And I remember writing it down because I was, like I said, I was in this transition, and we all go through tough times in life, but I remember looking at my address book because at that time I had a phone book and I had nobody that I could call. And I remember just feeling lost. And it really was, okay, so I need to do something. And my kids had gone through a teen leadership class. And I started looking at, how do I breed community? How do I get involved and create the community that will help me grow and that I could also give back? And it's mind blowing, some of the things that I did. I remember just heart pounding. I was going to this church at one time. I wasn't really active, but they said we need growth leaders, group leaders. And I remember raising my hand and I'm going, who am I to lead a group? I just went through a divorce. I'm a hot mess right now. But there was something in me that I was just said, because it was, what am I willing to do? And it was actually Rick Warren's on Purpose-Driven Life, which was the reason I'm here today, because it became my purpose and really being driven in life.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
I never put that.
I forgot about that.
I never put that correlation together. The purpose-driven life, driven leadership. Oh, anyway. Okay, cool.
Well, driven leadership didn't come from that, but the purpose-driven really had me look at just that drive for life. And it's so interesting because you talk about the one phrases, and sometimes we don't realize or recognize what we're creating. It's just this wake up moment. And it's something that becomes almost a non-negotiable. It's the time you look in the mirror and you take action in it. And then there's this ripple effect. And years later, holy cow, 12 years later, I'm like, oh my gosh. But 12, 20, hello, I can do math. 22 years later.
I was going to say.
Right?
12, yeah, it feels like 12 years ago.
Yeah, but I remember, what's your purpose? I don't know.
Well, I just love the mindset too, that committing to that phrase and getting to that point where it's like, okay, this is a thing. And now that is driving action subconsciously, where you're kind of like, I put my hand up. I'm like, what am I doing? Well, you've already agreed to that. So you're not letting your present fear get in the way of what you've already agreed to do, which I think is really powerful in those seasons of you're desperate for change. Something has to kick in, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think I was going to say your quote actually was one of the ones that I wrote down. It was from a conversation, interestingly enough, and it's very similar, just reworded a bit. It was from a conversation I was having with a mentor, and I was presenting this challenge to him. It was a challenge in life, and he was discussing, and he said, what's directly on the other side of this? What
of the challenge that you were looking at?
Yeah, of the challenge. And he kind of used a door, like a threshold. What's right directly on the other side of obedience in this, or the willingness just to go through it, or what's directly on the other side of this challenge that you're facing? Focus on that. Focus on, because you're so focused on the day-to-day or the challenge that you're in that you're missing everything else, and it's becoming a drudge, or it's becoming miserable for you. And so kind of in the same vein, or in same relational side. It's like, hey, what's the one thing I can do today, or the thing I can do to make myself better? It's interesting that both of those things kind of existed simultaneously. I think that was 12 years ago for me in that. So not
yours
2003.
is 12, mine was 22.
Yeah. It wasn't.
we can do math.
If it was 22, I'd be like 8 years old. So
well, thanks. Boom.
I was gonna say I wasn't gonna bring up what I was doing in 2003.
Yeah, in 2003, I think it was. Never mind.
So, no, you guys are younger than my kids. That's the weirdest thing. You're younger than my daughters.
That's so funny.
Well, in this vein, so that whole thing, I remember that it was such a year of growth. And my daughter we had bought her a car, and it was a lemon. And writing that down, and the car dealership was just yanking us around. She had a blown head gasket. And I was terrified of conflict before. And it just became, all right, what am I willing? What am I willing to do? And I walked into the car dealership. I demanded to talk to the sales manager, and I sat down, and I just went through the whole thing, and I became an advocate for myself. I became an advocate for my daughter. They actually they replaced it, gave me money for it. And that tied into another phrase that came out at the same time, is that the answer is always no unless you ask. So if we look at what are we willing to do to get to where we want to go, and yet if we don't ask, the answer is always no. We will never have what we want if we're not willing to take action, if we're not willing to make a stand, if we're not willing to raise our hand. So you can either think it or you become it.
Mary's got these locked in, like story mode. We hit the first one, and then the first one leads to the second one. That's fantastic. So how did that one show up for you, moving forward from the lemon and the car dealership? The answer is always no. Any other key moments for you in living through that one?
Through sales. I got a sales job. Fear of rejection. We talk about this. Fear of rejection actually shows up as one of the number one fears for salespeople. And I remember it was phone sales, and my heart would just pound. Like it would pound. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's the worst thing that could happen? Which is another phrase, right? What's the worst thing that could happen? It's already no. I don't have anything. So if it's already a no, then all I have to do is ask. If I ask, then it's either a yes or no, but it's already no if I don't ask. And so that really became, if I just stop, okay, it's already no if I don't ask. So what's the worst thing that can happen if I ask? I literally have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I have everything to gain, and I have nothing to lose. I mean, and that just pivots. It pivots in sales. It pivots in conversations.
Yeah.
It pivots in asking for help. And I think a lot of times too that we get so afraid because of rejection or being disappointed, but we can live in the misery, or we can live in the what ifs, or we can actually, what am I willing to do to get to where I want to go? Ask. And if we have nothing to lose and everything to gain, run to the roar. There's another one. I'm on a roll.
I'm gonna sign off. Mary's got this.
Well, that's what I want to go to. Austin, you snuck one in with the what's on the other side of what you're facing. Before we move on from that one, though, like how did that one practically, like how did you live that? Where did it show up? What were some key moments to that one for you?
Yeah, so that was actually around Colston, our oldest son, when we were fostering him. So we fostered to adopted 3 of our 5 kids, and we got him, and people always go like, man, y'all are saints and great job. And how'd you get into that? And it's always a story about like, it was actually kind of a wager that I lost. So there we go.
What?
Yeah, I know it wasn't the most virtuous way to get into it, but I had a passion for it because I was semi-fostered kid. I didn't live at home as a teenager and really didn't have a lot of direction there. And then my wife's family did a lot of fostering as well, and they always had foster kids in their home. And so there was always this urge that we wanted to foster and adopt. The wager came in when I wanted to have a baby. My wife was a first grade teacher, took care of kids her whole life, didn't want to have a baby. And so she said, I'll make you a deal. If we go through the foster care journey, we get certified. At the time, we were in an apartment, so we had to buy a house, get it all done, and go through 9 months of courses, which she was convinced I would not do. Then we could have a baby. And I said, okay, deal. And so 9 months later, we completed the course and we found out we were pregnant, and Colson was placed with us a week later. So, which we didn't know we were pregnant yet. So we found out right after he was placed with us. And so I'm working at Chick-fil-A at the time. She's teaching. We're doing fine financially, but her dream was to not work as a mom and to be able to focus fully on the kids. And so that just meant I had to figure out how to get enough money and make enough money to support our lifestyle, which was replace an entire income and also my income as well. So I remember talking with Luke about it. Luke was the owner at the time, and I'm just talking to him about all this stuff. And just side note there, it wasn't just the finances. Colston was just also a holy terror. The first time he came to our home, he beat on the door for 3 hours screaming he hated us. I was like, buddy, I don't even know you. I don't even know. I just met you. But he was scared. He was timid. He was a 4-year-old, 25 pounds. He was completely malnourished. He wasn't taken care of. And so it was like this journey of trust. And we would take him to the store and he would scream that we were hurting him. And so there was a limited connection. Taylor was depressed because she had postpartum depression. So anyway, all these challenges in life we're facing. And I came into work one day, and me looking very dull at the time was very rare. And so now it's not as rare because 5 kids. But anyway, I walked in and I was just not my normal self. And Luke pulled me aside and he said, what's going on? So I started talking to him about it, everything that was happening. And he said, man, you're focused so much on the challenges you're in, and you're not actually seeing it. You're not present in it. And so out of that, the challenge to me was what's directly on the other side of obedience here, right? You chose to do what you did. So what's directly on the other side of that? What's on the other side of this mountain that you're having to climb? Which is a family. That's what you wanted. Yeah, there's challenges in this, but you wanted to do this. This was a part of your decision to make it, and it doesn't come easy. And it was just this reality understanding that everything just started to click in, that how my expectations are around certain things, if they don't look that way, that's not because it was a bad decision or I shouldn't do it, but it's actually just the journey to get there, which then led to be all you are where you are. Was this kind of that phrase of what's on the other side of this kind of kept me grounded in being present in the moment, remembering what is to come. And really just started me on this journey as a young 20-year-old kid. How does that look? How do I keep in mind what I've made decisions on and what I want it to look like, at the same time be actively present in creating the reality, not stuck in the challenge of it itself? And it really took me out of that moment. So it was really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And yeah, now, over 10 years later, he's adopted. He's our son, and we got his 2 sisters as well in the process. So, and it always doesn't look like we want it to look, but I'm even asking myself that now too, as a dad of a 13-year-old who doesn't feel like I should be a dad of a 13-year-old, what's directly on the other side of this, and remembering the worth that's in it. So
that's great.
What about you, Connor? What are some of your
Well, I really only
phrases?
have one, and so I can do it now, or we can tease it for the end of the episode, because I feel like y'all are on a roll. Austin had his what's directly on the side, and then leads into be all you are where you are. Was that it?
Be all you are where you are. Yeah, I mean, what was interesting too is these are so funny, as I was even like writing all these down and listening to Mary and how they interconnect and intertwine and really go. They tell the story of not only the journey of progression, but they tell the story of what we value. right? Of the story of value. And so as I look through all of mine, they're surrounded by this theme of growth. For me personally, like I wanted to become a person that wasn't okay with who I was. I didn't want. I saw the history of my life, people becoming stagnant and complacent and not growing. And after 20 years, marriages failed. And after 15 years, and you didn't learn how to be a better dad or a dad to different types of kids, and or a mom to those, and the relationships struggle and they fail. And so it's just interesting as I'm looking at all these, like there's this constant theme of growth and presence and overcoming, because that's what I wanted to see my life in. And all these things just resonated within that strife. And so I guess, like, shout out to listeners here that are putting up with my stories, but write these down. Like, I would just say, what are the things that have stuck out to you, and think back over it? Because it's an interesting exercise as I've just done it, and go, what is the theme? Yeah, for sure. Just like right before the call, maybe during it a little bit too. But as I'm looking at it, I'm going, man, like there's just this theme that's going through. And I just went through the core needs for like Tony Robbins, and there's this driving force quiz that's on there or whatever. And one of the things, as I took the quiz, it was my driving force is growth. And I'm looking at all of these things. I'm like, well, that makes sense now. Like where all this comes from and why I care so much about this is because, I care about growth, but when I'm faced with challenge, how do I overcome it? Or how do I stay present in the midst of growth? Be all you are where you are. Or, growth and comfort don't coexist, right? Which is kind of the two of those blended together. And so it's just interesting. And I don't know if, Mary, you have that as you kind of wrote down your 5, but it seems that way because they're weaving within the fabric. And just knowing you, it seems to be aligned there. So
yeah. Well, it's so weird as I did the work prior to the call. Yeah, at the same time talking about it, I was like, oh, there's so many more, but they started somewhere. And it's in those moments where we make a shift, we make a pivot, where we want something different. And all of a sudden there is a phrase or a saying or a mantra or an affirmation that I see people will just grab a hold of, and they start to embody it. And we're at choice every day, every moment. Are we going to choose growth? Are we going to feed it's feed the wolf or feed the dog? What is that? What story? Remember, there's two. No. There's 2 stories. Oh my gosh, it was like an Indian proverb.
Whether you feed the wolf or feed the dog?
Yeah, so the good person, you're gonna cut this out.
I'm just thinking about like let the big dog eat.
I just love how she said you're gonna cut this. I just know you're gonna cut it. There's no point in going into it. Just clip it. Gosh. Just cut this out. It's
no, you feed the angel or you feed the devil. Like, right? You've heard that analogy.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have a choice. Something happens and we have thoughts all the time. And the story that we tell ourselves. So if it is a phrase or something that you want to step into to help you grow, we step into, that becomes our mantra to help us keep on track of what we want. Or we can feed the wolf or whatever the proverb was, the devil, right? And then all of a sudden now you're spiraling. So whatever we feed, whatever phrase, and paying attention, my goodness, if you pay attention to actually the things that you say to yourself, in the not so positive way, what we get in our life is a result of the thoughts that we think. And so when we on purpose change it, what we're talking about here, a phrase or a mantra or something that changed us, all of those who know me and have been through both, we talk about let the mess becomes a message. And it was around the same time of all of this personal growth with me in 2003, and I heard that phrase. And I was in such a transition of, man, there's mess. And we all have a mess. And I had a really shitty mess. And it was that period where I was no longer going to be the victim. I wasn't going to let it define me anymore.
Mm.
And when I heard that, it just woke something inside me and said, no, I'm going to use this to move forward. I'm going to let this mess become the message. And my hope was that it would give people hope. And it's so amazing because when people do that, whatever your mess is, there's grace, there's forgiveness, there's second chances. If we step into it, we can look at that mess and go, okay, my so what, now what, right?
Mm-hmm.
That mess, okay, it happened. You can't change it. So what can you do with it? How do you learn from it? How do you grow so that it truly becomes the message to help other people, to give them a way through it, to know that, hey, they can get to the other side.
Yeah. And you could throw it away, but then you're innately throwing away something that has shaped you and developed you, where it's like, yeah, I can ignore the mess and just be like, oh no, I want to forget about it. But that's still going to be a core of who you are as a person. Like it's developed you. So
Well, you know what I
just
found
changing the perspective of it is huge.
It does. And so many people need, not that they need the story of the mess in people's lives, but they need to know, and especially as leaders, and I know we get a lot of business leaders on here, there's something about being authentic. And not that people need to know your deep, dirty stuff.
Yeah.
That's not it. But they need to know that we make mistakes.
Yeah.
They need to know that we're not perfect. And how did you get through it instead of just sweeping it under the carpet, hoping it goes away? Because you know what? If we sweep it under the carpet and we hope it goes away, it will come back up and it will come back up and it will come back up. So when you embrace it and go, all right, here's my mess. Now, how do I help someone else? I'll go into a little bit of the mess. When I lived in Las Vegas for a period, working with another leadership company, and it was one of the hardest and yet best times of my life. And the hardest part is that I had moved there. I thought my kids were coming. They decided that God had different plans for it. But I remember just being really, really lost, and I didn't have friends. So I moved to a state, didn't know anyone. I had people at work, but I had just started there. And I went to a casino. Well, and the casino was not, yeah. So those of you who ever gambled and got down I ended up spending way too much money that I didn't have. And I remember just beating myself up. Who are you? What do you think you're doing? You're in leadership and yet you don't have your shit together. And I still remember I was in the spiral, but I was lost and I was hurt. And I was hurting. And I just remember in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm just going to own it. And I don't even know where the so what now what. It was around that time that I would journal. I would write it. And I remember telling somebody about it. I think it was my brother. And I realized that when I gave a voice to whatever that fear, whatever that stuff in my life that I wasn't proud of, because I didn't want that. I just remember I knew it was because when we're lost or when we're hurt, sometimes we look for things to fill it up. And like it changed. It changed everything. But that's also where, grace and forgiveness comes in, and people have stuff like that. So whether you end up drinking too much, or you spend too much, or you Amazon too much, or you game too much, like there's something, we all have something, but how do you, as you work through it, what am I willing to do to get to where I want to go? When people see that we're not perfect, we're perfectly imperfect. There's another one. But we're willing to do it, right? We work through the mess so we can come out through the other side so that we're better versions of ourselves. Yeah. Not to use it as an excuse.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm interested to even kind of explore this, because I think the question that you posed to us was what's radically changed your life, and I think oftentimes we look back on those, but even as I'm sitting here talking, I'm going like, what are the ones recently? As I'm hearing Mary talk, what are the most recent ones that really stuck out? and I'd love to hear, Mary, your thoughts on this, and I'll just kind of share first on this. But the one recently that has really stuck with me enough to get a tattoo of it on my arm, which is my wife was like, "Where'd that come from?" I was like, "I don't know. It just hit me at the right time, I guess." And now I got a tattoo. But and I literally look at it every day. It's on my forearm, and it's just stay curious. And the story behind that one is actually in marriage and in my kids and in each other and in people. Like it's like the older I've become, the more certain I've become on things rather than uncertain on things. It's like the more I know I don't know. And that's real in me. And I see that. But the more I become certain, the more I see myself. I believe the fallacy that this is the way it is. And so, meaning like this predictable understanding of my wife, for instance, how she's going to respond or what she wants or what she feels because we've been together for so long, or my kids, and forgetting to stay curious about them. Mm-hmm. And then also I think for myself as well, like I am a functional being. And in the same way I seek growth in all these areas of my life, I can also become not curious about myself. And so this whole idea of like curiosity for me, and it says stay curious on my arm, but it's about stay curious of people, stay curious of continue to date, continue to ask the questions that you may feel certain about.
Continue to what?
Date.
It's not like you said continue to date. Continue to date your wife.
I guess okay. If you need to make that clarifying thing there, I mean, I'm open to date whoever. Yeah, call me at Haydel Tinder.
Are we giving dating advice now? Like you're saying,
we're not going to stay curious.
Open your marriage up. Stay curious, everybody.
Just pursue your greatest curiosities.
I love Connor's face up because I was like, did I just hear that too?
I was really making an effort to contextualize it in the right way. I wasn't able to get there. So
okay, well,
thank you for
cut that shit out.
We're not cutting anything. Now that it's been brought up, the scissors are staying on the desk.
Okay, well, keep the scissors. Stay curious about dating my wife. Stay curious about her and continue to date, right? And it was this whole understanding of even myself of going like when I feel certain in something or when I feel secure in something, I often lose curiosity. And so
I think that's the biggest pitfall to like growing up, like being like getting older and gaining wisdom in areas is that you become like hardened in the new. That's why old people have a reputation of like just being stuck in their ways because so it's like how do you get yourself out of that and continually remind yourself. I find that in my kids a lot where it's like, oh yeah, okay, Barrett is not 3 years old anymore. I need to be curious about what he's thinking about and doing it. Like he's very different than the toddler stage, which keeps life interesting. But it's really easy to fall into that. Like everything is the same. The people I know are the same. So I have to operate like they're the same. So,
yeah. And even situations are the same. And I find myself, man, it sucks. But like I find myself constantly comparing situations to other situations instead of being curious and asking questions within the situation that gives clarity to the situation. And
because everything's new. Yeah.
Because everything's new. And it needs to be new. And let it be new. And let it be exciting. And I think I found that in my own life is that's where excitement comes is in the new, and stay curious about that. So that's my most recent one that has really stuck out to me. Mary, what's your one you've been pondering recently? And then Connor, we get to hear your one.
Yeah,
I think I have another one.
It's recent, but it actually showed up. Well, this one was like 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
We're 2006 now.
No, it was after my first colon surgery. It's what can you do? Like, what can I do? So for those of you who don't know, I had actually I had 2 colon surgeries. First surgery, they attached my colon wrong and didn't realize I was going septic. I was septic. That's why I had the colon surgery, but I had a stricture and I was in massive pain all the time where I couldn't eat any food. I couldn't digest things. And I went to see a naturopathic because nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And I remember going into a grocery store and I had no idea. I was so hungry, but I knew that I couldn't eat anything because I was in so much pain. So getting to the naturopathic, she said, here's a list of what you can have. And I realized as soon as I knew what I could have, she did a bunch of blood work and did different things. It settled me down because I could focus on what I could do. So fast forward, same, this year, those of you who don't know, I had, 2024, had 2 surgeries, gallbladder out and hiatal hernia, and the same thing, digestive. But because I'd been through it and there's pain and figuring out what I could and couldn't eat, I have to focus on what I can do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's eating, if it shows up in the day-to-day at work, when I'm stressed, when things feel out of control, what can I control? Control the controllables. What can I do? And that gives me hope. And it's not just when we have something to focus on, then we know what path to take. It reminds me, Dr. Henry Cloud, during COVID, I listened to him and he was doing a podcast and he was saying, when people are faced with, going into, it seems so long ago. It seems so weird that COVID was actually a thing. But he was saying that when people know what to do, they know different ways to solve things if there's a challenge because they've seen it, they've done it before. And he said, picture that you're going to the refrigerator, someone throws a couch in the way and you have to walk around it, but hey, that's a couch. I'm going to my refrigerator. I can move the couch, I can do something, but I know what to do. But with COVID, we didn't know anything. Everything was out of our control. And the way he said it went back into what I can do. He said, when you focus on what you can do, make your bed. All of a sudden, your brain calms down because we spiral so out of control if we don't have hope, if we don't know what we can do. So in those moments, what can you control? What can you do? Make the bed. It gives you this sense of stability. And once you do that, then you look for something else that you can do. So that's my mantra that's been this year is, well, what can you do? What can you control? What's that one little thing?
I really like that one too, because that comes up quite a bit. And now in my personal life, as I've talked to people, because that's a phrase that, you and Eric use all the time. We're like, okay, just focus on what you can control. It gets people out of their like decision paralysis when it's like, hey, I've committed to this thing, but now I don't have time for it. And so I don't know what to do. And it's like, okay, well, what can you control? It's like, well, I can control by like not doing that anymore. It's like, okay, well then that's the decision. But they were frozen by that fear of making a hard decision when it's like, okay, well, focus on what you can control and then do it. And now you're making progress. But a lot of the times, I know for when Eric told me that over a year ago, like, we'll just focus on what you can't control, I realized that the things that I could control were really scary to control. And that's what was keeping me in that same position. And so that that's a deeper one than it seems, because at first it's like, focus on what you can't control. Like I can, get out of bed at this time. I can whatever. But when you start getting into things that you're afraid of controlling, or the things that maybe you have limited control in, that's when it really you start to see some momentum shift in your life.
Yeah, and also accepting the things you can't control as well.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the whole basis of all recovery programs. That's the basis of all really self-improvement in general is, and so to your point, like it sounds so easy to just focus on what you can control, answer the question, what can I do? But on the antithesis of that is also accepting what you can't control and being at peace with what's there as well. And that is the harder section for me, is really being able to have that serenity and say, okay, I got to accept the things I cannot change and move forward in the things I can and know the difference in those. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's that lesson in my life was everything. Because there's studies that actually show, to Connor, what you were saying is that it's so hard when it's out of your control, or and it's scary, and our minds will go down this spiral. And I had read this study that it's talking about the hippocampus part of our brain, that when we're focused on negative, even watching a negative TV program or a show, or even listening to negative music, they were doing the study on the brain, and your creative pathways shut down, and everything you're focused on, and it gets bigger and bigger, is the negative side. And if we stop and focus on, okay, I notice that I'm thinking, or I notice that I'm doing, okay, so what can I do?
Yeah.
Make my bed. Okay, what can I do? I can have that conversation. What can I do? All of a sudden, a different pathway opens up, and it opens up into creativity. It's huge.
Yeah. Also great band, by the way, Hippocampus. Check those guys out. I'll go into mine. It's one that I you were talking about ones that have hit recently. I don't really have one that's really shown up recently that I've latched onto, mostly because this one is still occupying the space of a day-to-day mantra or saying, although it came up in 2017, I guess. So however many years ago that was, 8 years ago.
We can do math. Boom.
Did I get it right?
Somebody can.
I don't know. If you got it wrong, put it in the show notes.
Well, it came, 8 years ago, 2017, and it was from a YouTube video, this random YouTube video I'd been suggested to me, and but I really latched onto it, which is kind of how these go. Some other phrases I've just latched onto them and figure out what they mean for myself. And the one that stuck out was this phrase, reality over expectations. And in the video, the guy was prosing that if you keep the reality of your situation above the expectations of your situation, that equals happiness. Well, I didn't really like the word happiness. It felt a little too subjective. Well, what does happiness mean? And so I just latched on to reality over expectations for a few months. Well, then Austin and I were on a train out of New York going camping, and we, as we often do, talk about this kind of stuff. And so we brainstormed on well, okay, if I'm keeping the reality of a situation over expectations, what is the actual outcome of that? And as I'd lived it through those few months, I realized that it was completely in my brain, completely diffusing the situation, any situation that come up, in terms of making the train on time, because I would commute via the subway, or arguments with my wife. I am focused. I realized my pattern was I'm focusing on what the expectations are of the situation. So then when the reality crashes down on top of that, it was I'm spiraling, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, I'm just feel out of control. And so switching those two and accepting that reality much faster. What we realized on the train that day was that it's not happiness, but it equals presence. I'm able to fully contextualize in any given moment what is happening. So for the simple example of I missed the train, past Connor would have stood there for 2 minutes and be like, well, great, this just sucks. Of course this happened. Now what? Now I'm frantic and looking. But when I switched that and balanced the equation, now I'm like, okay, well, the reality is I missed it. I need to get another ticket, or I just have to wait 10 minutes. And the reality is I'm going to be late. My expectation was that I wasn't going to be late, but that's just what it is. So now I can communicate that to the people that need to know about it and not make excuses. And I'm prepared to show up to work late, even though that was not my expectation. And then on a more real level, in marriage or in friendships, you put so much, I realize I've had so much expectations on other people. I expect when I come home for this to happen, or I expect in this conversation for it to go this way. And so flipping that script, again, balancing this equation, that is my phrase, and putting the reality above that is okay, now I can actually participate in the conversation because I'm just living in reality. I'm not living in being frustrated that you've subversed my expectations of you, the other party. And so it is, I've never let go of it. Like it's a very, not being hyperbolic, it's a daily thing that's in my head of put reality over expectations. And so I don't have it tattooed on me yet.
It's coming.
like Austin does. But that's the one that I've really, there's some other ones there are other ones that I've held on to in my life, but that's the biggest one that's got me through small changes. The trash wasn't taken out, and then big changes, even to a weird degree, like family members passing unexpectedly. Like it at least helps me get into that processing mode faster than living in the spiral of expectations. So.
It's funny you said that, because I think we actually had a conversation about that quote like 3 days ago. So it's super cool.
Yeah, it shows up all the time.
The one I know I say it, and I said it earlier, is the so what now what. Like I live by that. I live by it. It's the thing that keeps me grounded. It's the thing that keeps me present. It's like, all right, so what? I can't control what just happened. I can't control yesterday. I can't control, whatever. Now what? What can I do? Which links them all together.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I love what Austin said earlier, for the audience, right? Hopefully you got something out of these that we shared, but also go find your own, like journal down what those mantras have been throughout your own life. And you may be surprised at how many show up, because as we were talking about it, I said, I have one. And then as went through them, I started writing down other ones that popped up. We're like, oh yeah, I did hold on to this for a season. And find the ones that resonate for you, because the reality is, like Mary shared, like, so what, now what, and reality over expectations share the same space, I think, mentally. Like they're very similar in what they move you, the action to do. But find the ones that resonate with you. And this is genuine. Like we would love to hear the ones that you have. Email us, DM us on Instagram. Get in touch with us any way you can. podcast@drivenleadership.com. And this is really cool. I really enjoyed this.
Fun.
Yeah.
I think all of a sudden my mind is just like, oh no, but we have more. We have more.
Yeah. And
so
I
have
to just
day one or one day.
Come on.
Right?
Follow us for part 2.
Yeah.
And we'll get Eric in here. I'm curious to see. Eric's the type of guy. He's like, well, I don't have one. What are you talking about?
I know.
So
I was going,
we'll push him in the right direction.
Right. It's like, what?
Yeah. We'll get him in here for the second one. So, all right, everybody. Well, thanks. It was. This was really cool. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you, Austin and Mary, for, as always, being vulnerable. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.